Yo guys, I'm Vanity.
So today I wanted to kick off a two-part tutorial series on how to achieve that J Dilla sound in your own mixes. You can see here I've got 4 of his tracks. I'm going to look at one by one and just comment on some of the characteristics that are present in each record. And then part 2 is going to be about how to get the J Dilla sound, what compression tactics to use, what equalize settings, etc. I'm going to be taking you through one of my own tracks, Eternally, which is very much inspired by J Dilla, so I thought it would be a good idea to just break it down, just go through it, and just kind of explain some of the principles I've applied and some of the mixing techniques that I've used throughout the record. Firstly, I just want to get across that my purpose behind making this tutorial series is actually to give some artists and producers, they say they might want to know how to make a J Dilla kick drum or how to make a J Dilla sounding snare. That's what this tutorial is going to be for. It's going to be for them people. It's not for the people who are looking just to, copy and rinse J Dilla's sound, because, only Dilla can do Dilla. So this is just going to sort of highlight some of the principles and some of the main characteristics of a Dilla record. And then I'm hoping that people are then going to use that as a foundation from which they can apply to their own records, their own mixes, and whatnot. So yeah, to start with, I just want to talk about common mixing characteristics that are apparent throughout all of his records. In order to, sort of establish a baseline for this, I've got 4 tracks loaded up here. They're quite varied tracks. Fall in Love is a track he made for Slum Village. The Light he made for Common. They're all sort of taken from various albums and from various sort of years. So I've got a nice varied bunch to give us a sort of idea of some of the common characteristics that are apparent in a J Dilla mix. So firstly, I'm going to, play 10 to 15 seconds of each one. I'll just run through them in quick succession. But we've got Fall in Love at the top, we've got The Light, Won't Do, and Think Twice. So let's get into it then.
1, 2. 1, 2. Don't sell yourself too far in love.
Like this, gotta be something for me to write this. Queen, I ain't seen you in a minute. Wrote this letter and finally decided to send it. Signed, sealed, delivered for us to grow together. Love has no limit, let's spin it slow forever. I know your heart is weathered by what Studs did to you. I ain't gonna tell them cause I probably did it too.
Raw, pimp put on weight from fighting the mall. In the mall, you see it and like it is yours. That's a nice fit, you ain't gotta price shit. I pays for it like the mics and the sauce.
Alright, so the first thing I'm noticing is that J Dilla's kick and his bass are sitting at very similar frequency ranges. So the kick drum sits between 60 and 80 Hz towards the bottom of the frequency analyzer. So the kick drum's sitting around this little section here. We'll just take another listen to Fall in Love and just listen to the kick drum and then watch it, watch around here on the frequency analyzer and just see if you can spot it.
I'm out of this, cause you wanna be below. Y'all niggas in love with the S. Y'all niggas in love with the S.
Dilla's kicks all sound very similar across all of his records too, especially these 4 here. They all sound very round, very warm, and they've got a very analog tone to them. Now what I mean by rounded is, they've got a very sort of slow attack with a nice long or medium release. But even though they're very subtle and there's not a lot of high end going on in them, they're still very pronounced and you can still hear the distinction between the bass line and the kick drum. Now the way Dilla has accomplished this is he's used a technique called sidechain compression. He's actually sidechained the kick drum to the sub bass. So basically, if you don't know what sidechaining is, it's quite a simple concept. It just means that in this case the bass is ducking and allowing the kick to pass through clean without the bass sort of spilling over the kick sample. I think the best way to think of it is like a gate. So imagine sidechaining as a gate. In this example, I'm going to say the bass is the gate. The gate opens, the bass ducks to let the kick drum through, and then the gate closes, as the kick drum finishes, basically. Now this is a very subtle technique that he's used, and you'll see later on in this video that he's used it actually on a wide range of different instruments and effects in order to get clean mix down. So while his kicks are hitting between 60 and 80, I'm pretty sure the bass is sitting in almost exactly the same place, which is, it's quite an interesting concept actually, because a lot of producers, not just in hip hop but in any genre, there's a big distinction between the kick drum and the bass line. I mean, I think another one of Dilla's characteristics is how well the records are mixed, but not only the whole record, I think how he's got the bass to sit on top of the kick, but they're still both ever so present. I'm just going to have another listen to Think Twice because it's a very sparse record and you can really hear the drums. So let's just take a quick listen to that again. Sidechain is so subtle you can barely hear it, but it is apparent in that record. I'll play a little bit of the light again and just see if you can spot where the snare is on the frequency spectrum.
Side the Senate, signed, sealed, delivered for us to grow together. Love has no limit, let's spin a slow forever. I know your heart is weathered by what Studs did to you. I ain't gonna salt him cause I probably did it too. Because of you feelings I handle with kid.
Alright, did you get it? It's around the 1K area. Dilla's snares are, they're very loud. I mean, they're almost as loud as the rest of the record, which again I think is another characteristic in a Dilla record. He uses a lot of rimshot snare samples, but there have been a lot of tracks where he's just used, a straight snare hit, but I think there's always a rimshot laid in there because there's always a nice bang and a click to his snare. And unlike the kick drum sounds, Dilla's actually got a very sharp attack on the snare with a very sort of, medium release again. So what that means is that it gives the snare drum a very sort of sharp edge and like a pointed edge, like a knife. They've got a very sort of click when they hit, they're very sharp and they cut through everything in the mix. The reason they cut through isn't just because of the sharp edge, it's also again because he sidechained the kick and the snare actually to the sample, which I'm going to talk about now. So the sample again is ducking out of the way to allow passage for the kick and the snare, which is again an interesting concept because it allows the sample to actually sit, really forward in the mix, but then it, jumps back when it needs to. All this sidechaining compression is very, very subtle. It's not anything extreme like you might hear in some house records or some electro records. It's very subtle, but it provides for a very clean mix. I also wanted to point out that when you're sampling from vinyl, don't clean up the sample. Leave it dirty, leave it even if it's scratched, just leave it how you recorded it. Even if it's distorting, but if it's distorting a little bit, that's fine, but nothing drastic. But just leave all the crackle, leave all the good stuff in there because that's what gives it the analog characteristics. And this is exactly what Dilla did. He didn't clean up the sample, he just left it as raw as it was when he recorded. Now, if you're recording from other mediums such as YouTube, I wouldn't recommend that, but I know some people do. So even if you're sampling MP3s that your mate's giving you, or you're sampling, CDs or whatever, try and add some sort of analog characteristics in there. So try and add some vinyl crackles, try and add some hiss, mechanical noise, just try and add something to dirty up a bit because you don't want it sounding too clean. You want to try and get it sounding like it has come from vinyl, really. Because that's exactly, Dilla was sampling straight off vinyl, so obviously his samples are very organic anyway, but a lot of us don't sample from, vinyl. We might not have a turntable, we might not have the sample we want on vinyl, so just something to bear in mind. So just to do a quick sum up of a Dilla record, all the content in the Dilla record I feel sticks out. So his drums are, ever so present in every record he's made, especially his snares. Let's just take another listen to The Light again and listen to how clean the drummers are and how ever so present they are, even, over the vocals.
Under the glare, I ain't the type to walk around with matching shirts. A relationship is effort, I will match your work. I wanna be the one to make you happiest and hurt you the most. They say the end is near, it's important that we close to the most high. Regardless of what happened on him, let's rely.
There are times when you need someone.
Yeah.
I will be mine.
It's a very, very clean track and it's very well mixed. And that's the sound that Dilla's well known for. I'd also like to point out, while I'm on the topic of samples as well, is sample selection. Sample selection is the most important thing when creating drums because it's very important that you get samples that sound close to what you want the finished product to sound like, rather than you know, applying lots of effects to them to try and get them close to what you want. You know, the old saying, you can't polish a turd, comes to mind here. So make sure the samples that you pick, especially for your kicks and snares, which are the main elements, just make sure that they're really good quality samples, and make sure that they sound, you know, almost, if not as, like you want them to sound like, because there's a lot of people that might pick a kick drum, for example, that's not maybe as low frequency centered as they may like, and then they might start boosting 100 Hz and cutting at 1K or whatever. But boosting actually adds harmonic distortion into a sound, and it will degrade sound quality eventually if you're applying a lot of different effects to it. So make sure that you're using the minimum amount of effects you can to achieve the best results. On the track I'm going to take you through in part 2, there's only one snare present on that track, and it's a rim shot, and it sounded perfect to start with, so I used it and I've not applied really any effects to it whatsoever. And that goes for the hats and the percussion too. Make sure your percussion is sitting around 10 to 12k, because there's a lot of hi-hats that are very, you know, low frequency centered. They might be centered around 1k or 500. You want to make sure that they've got a nice sort of sparkle and crackle to them. And that's another thing Dilla uses in his records, is I think he actually boosts his hi-hats around 10k by around 8 dB on some of the records, but he turns the output down. So just make sure if you do actually have to boost something, just make sure that you turn the output down, you know, by whatever you're boosting it by, otherwise you're going to get distortion on your sound. Another thing I want to point out for the percussion is make sure you sidechain your percussion as well to your main kick and snare, because when you sidechain your percussion to your main elements of your drums, they'll actually duck in and out between, you know, your kick and your snare hitting. So it's going to give you some more, you know, groove in your hi-hats or your shakers or your tambourines or whatever else you're using, and it's also going to allow the kick and the snare to hit through without there being any other, you know, sounds on top of them. So you've got your sub bass and your kick drum at the bottom end of the frequency spectrum, around 60 to 80. You've got the sample filling out the mid-range section. The sample can vary. I mean, I'm going to say it's around, you know, 100 to 1k maybe, around that sort of region. But again, as I said, try and leave that dirty and try not to filter anything out. Just leave it as you recorded it if you can. He also then has his snare sitting around 1k if they're rim shots. If they're kind of normal, just straight snare hits, they might be sitting a little bit lower than that. They might have a bang around 250. But 1k usually where the main frequency is for the rim shot sounds. He's then got his hi-hats or his percussion usually sitting in the tweeter right at the top end of the track, so usually around 10 to 12k. As I mentioned before, if you are boosting that high, make sure you turn your output down, but try and find the samples that already, you know, have the big 10k presence in them if you can. On the mastering side of things as well, a lot of the Dilla records, especially the earlier ones, are actually recorded to tape first. So if you want to emulate that, add some tape hiss into your records, or I think Ozone Isotope actually has got a tape preset setting in there. So if you know, do some research online about, in fact I might even do a tutorial on a few different mastering processes if that's something you guys would be interested in. So yeah, just leave me a comment below and let me know. But tape's got a very distinct sound to it, and that's something that's ever so present on early Dilla records. So maybe you want to try and emulate that also. So, you know, you could try and add some tape hiss in there. You can even add some vinyl crackles, you know, throughout the whole record, but just make sure they're subtle and they're not too loud, because I've heard a lot of tracks where the vinyl crackles are, like, you know, louder than the rest of the record. So just make sure you're careful on that front. Yeah, so I think that's about it. That's all I want to say on Dilla's records. In the next tutorial, I'm going to take you through one of my own tracks called Eternally. I'm going to show you some of the mixing characteristics that I applied, especially to the drums, because I think the drums are one of the main things in a Dilla record that are so critical to get right. I'll take you through that track, so then you'll be able to apply anything you've then learned in this tutorial. Hopefully when I bring the next one out, you can then put the two pieces of the puzzle together and apply it to your own track. Yeah, so, you know, thanks for watching this. I'll catch you in a couple of days when I upload part 2 of this tutorial, which, like I said, is going to be about one of my own records, and I'll take you through a process of me building it. If I did miss anything, or if there's anything you want me to explain further or want to include on part 2 of this tutorial, please drop me a comment below. I'll always reply, and I'll always include it in the next video if it's something you're interested in. Alright guys, peace.